I can't fathom what a life without music would be, because that's all my life has ever been.
It sounds good, it feels good. It makes you wake up, it makes you want to go places, it makes you want to create. It's part of my DNA. I know nothing else.
Humans evolved in a unique way among species in that our neurons fire synchronously with a beat.
And so when we dance together, when we listen to music, that whole social network of brain areas is kind of lighting up, firing together while we're in the same room, dancing to the same music.
We were all like having this like slow build, and then it dropped. We just danced so hard, and I like blacked out.
You know, it's when you have a connection with the crowd and you create this new energy, you know, when you get the chills.
I think it's a way of like connecting you and inviting you into new communities, meeting new people, like-minded people. So it's really important just for like finding yourself.
You feel it, like internally, externally, you feel it with your friends, spiritually. Yeah. Like, it's a vibe. You can't verbally describe it because you physically feel it.
I've always loved science and thought that would be my career. However, music started playing a bigger role in my life. I became a DJ, and eventually my entire world started to revolve around music. But the question I have is why? What is the science behind why music has such an impact on us as individuals, but also, why does it seem to have the power to create connections between people and bring us closer together, especially on the dance floor? I've been DJing for almost 7 years now, and I've been lucky enough to be able to travel all around the world doing what I do. There's something about the way that music brings communities together, the connection that it brings, whether that's when I'm behind a DJ booth, in a studio with other producers, or when I'm on the dance floor myself. There's an incredible exchange of energy that music brings that deeply resonates with me.
I would never really consider myself a club kid, which is funny, living in what's considered definitely a mecca for club culture. But I missed the club so much during COVID. I never realized how important it was for me as a space where I could meet people and engage with people, but also have these feelings of connection. I think there isn't really anything that you can do to replicate that feeling of being immersed, surrounded by hundreds, if not thousands of people, having a fat sound system hug you with sound, having the lighting show, and just feeling that connection. And so at some point you have to ask yourself the question, why? Why do I have this desire to immerse myself in these frequencies and these sounds? And so the journey I'm about to go on is to understand that. I'm speaking to scientists, artists, community builders, organizers, music producers, to understand what music does for them and how they connect with music.
Rhythm is at the very core of the evolution of music for humans and the ancestors of humans who were called hominins. And that when we're listening to music, we are time traveling. We're not concerned with concepts or with words, but with something much more fundamental. And we don't get that from any of the other art forms, not from painting or from literature. Only music gives it to us. Just to reinforce that, music is our umbilical cord back to Mother Nature.
I'm into music because that's what I do with my life. When the pandemic happened, and when there was no music and all the lights were off and the curtains were closed, I still had the need for this music so deeply and penetrating me, like penetrating my soul, like I needed to listen to this music, to create it.
We've used music not just as a recreational diversion, not just as a nice to have, but we've used it as a tool of social cohesion. We've used it as a tool of trance or state or of shamanic journeying. And to me, that's just endlessly fascinating in its implications.
I've been doing my research on how and why music affects us so deeply, and a name kept on coming up again and again. Daniel Levitin is considered the godfather of this subject and is the author of a best-selling book called This Is Your Brain on Music. Prior to him becoming a psychologist and a neuroscientist, he was also a music producer. I have a feeling he might have some of the answers to my questions. I arranged to meet him at his home in LA to dive deeper into his knowledge. I want to understand more about why humans feel such a strong connection with music and why it brings us together.
I have to admit, I've been reading This Is Your Brain on Music for around the past 6 months now.
It is a slog, isn't it?
It's not, well, for me, being able to dive really underneath the hood of like what's happening in your brain was riveting. And so one of the first questions I actually had for you is, does music affect your brain in a way that's different from some of the other things that we hear?
Humans evolved in a unique way among species in that our neurons fire synchronously with a beat. And that neural synchrony is connected to our motor system. So without even thinking about it, we can tap our feet or clap our hands. We move to the music. We dance. And that's something that no animal can do other than humans. As a consequence of all this electrical activity, neurons are sending out these electrical impulses. You get this wave-like phenomenon in the brain. And why are they sending out electricity? Well, they're trying to spur the production and release of different chemicals. These different brain states characterize different states of consciousness. In order for music to move us emotionally, to make us feel exhilarated or joyful or relaxed, any of those things require that we surrender to the music. And there's no greater example of that than the dance floor.
I had never realized that the reaction in our brains to a beat is unique to humans and that moving our bodies generates electrical impulses in our brains, in turn releasing a mixture of chemicals. This is what affects us and those around us emotionally, which is why this musical experience on the dance floor can feel so powerful.
What music does, it's a form of telepathy or sharing a theory of mind, as philosophers call it. You can intuit someone's emotion or intention by the way they sing or the way they gesture. Rhythm coordinates action. So people would hunt together and they would party together. And through rhythm, we can share emotion and share activity, and we call that dancing. And it's why dance is such a triumphant, validating human endeavor. But repetition is also at the heart of pattern making. And it's a sweet way of the brain to understand mathematics without having to think too hard. So we're dancing to maths unwittingly. When we listen to music, it releases a whole soup of different neurotransmitters or hormones. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and they're all doing different things. One is fun, one is true happiness, and one is attachment. There's a fourth hormone called cortisol, which is about stress. And what oxytocin also does is to reduce our stress levels. So it's win, 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 win at every level.
Your brain has a little area, a sliver of tissue here called Brodmann area 47. And I've been studying this for 30 years. And this is the part of the brain that's trying to figure out what's going to happen next in a sequence. It expected that other beat. And it could be a complicated thing like, it knows where it needs to go. And when a composer or a performer can somehow complete the thought in a way that's new, fundamentally, your brain has learned something. If nothing else, your brain is an exquisite change detector, and it picks up on these little things and it's delighted by them. If you're enjoying it, the parts of your brain that are surprised by something new or exciting or pleasurable in the limbic system, regions like the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens, they're releasing dopamine and modulating levels of the brain's own internal opioids. So same kind of opioids that we can get out of poppies and that gets turned into OxyContin and heroin, your brain has its own endogenous interior opioids.
It's kind of like the pure ecstasy that you get from being on the dance floor, the energy from the people, the energy from the music, your body that moves. There's something that moves you inside of you that releases.
I was fascinated by the fact that our own internal systems create such a large cocktail of drugs. This helped me understand why music and dancing can give us such a high, but I was curious to understand exactly why this helps bring us closer together and feel connected to one another.
The more interesting evolutionary part, though, I think might be social bonding. We had predators at night, we needed to stay up. There's a lot of evidence now that early humans slept in 2 phases. They might sleep right after their dinner, and then wake up in the middle of the night and stand vigil, and then go to sleep again. And somewhere along the line, they figured out that if they're singing together, it sounds like there's more people than there really are, especially if they're singing in harmony. And that singing together releases a brain chemical called oxytocin that helps you feel bonded and part of something bigger than you. Oxytocin is also responsible for social salience, the sense that you're part of something bigger than you, part of a community.
Daniel explained to me that oxytocin is one of the body's most pleasant hormones and is sometimes called the love drug. When we hear music and oxytocin is released, it can encourage pro-social behavior like trust and positive memories. It also aids with the feeling of connection and positive communication.
I think that music enables us to have this sense of being glued together with other people. We can appreciate the same somatic sense of what's going on in the music. We can also appreciate this area of, some might call it the community sense of unconsciousness, this collective unconscious, where something's going on a much more spiritual area where we're all coming together as humans. I think it's innately in us to communicate, and it's innately in us to want to have joint experiences together with others.
I think that when it comes to music, I almost feel as though it's like another form of communication. When you're able to bond over like a certain track, or you realize that you have similar tastes in music, it's a really great foundation, because I believe that music really connects you on a soul level.
In a world where politicians go and weaponize different minorities in this kind of populist world, it's nice to have a safe haven that you remember that actually, like, people are just people, and that there is more that unites us than divides us.
Some people, I haven't even spoken a word of whatever language you're speaking. Like, they don't speak a lick of English, I don't speak a lick of their language. We're looking at each other, we're enjoying the vibe. Like, we don't have to actually speak the same language. It's literally like, if I'm dancing, you're happy, I'm happy, we're dancing. Like, there's not much that needs to be said. Words do not need to be spoken.
So it's not just that we enjoy music and the company of those around us. It's that by listening to music, we are generating chemicals and electrical impulses in our brains that make us feel more connected and friendly to others. This is why we seem to bond with others more easily on the dance floor. Back in Berlin, I was very fortunate that the author of the book, Assembling a Black Counterculture, was in town, DeForest Brown Jr. He agreed to meet me to discuss his book about the electronic music scene and the origins of techno music. There were some fascinating stories in his book about the importance of those early house and techno parties and the role these spaces played in bringing together marginalized communities.
I definitely think parties have a role in electronic music and the way in which it distributes itself to people. And that's a really important part of Chicago house and New York garage music, is that there were queer people on the dance floor that were connecting with the queer people making the music. And queer Black people were on the forefront of innovating this kind of movement music, this kind of body music. And what's interesting about techno to the side of this is that it's kind of nerdy. It's kind of like it was Dungeons and Dragons music. And Juan Atkins wasn't actually going to the club until, Derek May, Eddie Fowlkes, and Kevin Saunderson kind of pulled him out to the youth parties and had him bring his 808 drum machine. They suddenly hear a live drum machine, like Japanese technology, and they're like, what is that? And Juan Atkins is like, it's the future.
A lot of the time, particularly in popular culture these days, when people make reference to black music, it's usually in reference to hip hop or R&B or something else, and often doesn't include techno, house, and a lot more of other electronic elements. Why do you think that is?
Honestly, it has everything to do with this distribution. I mean, when Techno, the Dance Sound of Detroit compilation came out in 1988, it was immediately replicated by other people who were able to access these machines at a point, almost 10 years after Juan Atkins bought his original drum machine. And you just had, 20, 30 people making these records completely separate from the original culture. But that's where things get interesting with this concept of black music, is that in the UK, you suddenly have people taking, drum breaks from the Winston brothers and inventing the amen break, and they take like the re-space from Kevin Saunderson and put it under, and suddenly you get jungle and drum and bass, and it speeds up, and then suddenly it slows down into dubstep, and then it transforms again into grime, and it just kind of, you have this sort of continuum that's happening across these communities. And I think the shareability of electronic music from a production level is what makes it really special. And I think that's it. Like underground resistance coming from Detroit over into Berlin, and then the music kind of spreading. You have, Juan Atkins, Derek May, Carl Craig, all going over to the UK and interacting with 4Hero and a guy called Gerald, but also 808 State, the artist from Warp Records. This vibrational technology appears to be something that can cross nation-state lines through distribution. It seems to be able to just make people feel. And that's what this is all about, right? It's about feeling these kind of cosmic tones that come through this batch of machinery, and designing the future together through togetherness.
DeForest's deep knowledge of the scene and its history was inspiring, particularly learning more about Detroit, where so many of the black pioneers of the techno scene honed their craft. Detroit has always been a city that is renowned for its love of music. Detroit is a place that has gone through difficult times, but music has become one of the strongest forces in the revival of the city. I wanted to investigate for myself just how the power of music has helped shape communities there. Detroit is home to one of the longest running festivals in the world, Movement Festival. This city is considered ground zero for techno music. For me, as a self-confessed music obsessive and a techno enthusiast, it's really special to have been able to visit. It was wonderfully obvious how music really is the lifeblood of this city. There was an incredible sense of energy at the festival, and it was a real pleasure to be on stage to catch one of Detroit's most renowned DJs, Seth Troxler, in action on the decks.
The crowd of Movement's incredible. It's this mix of Midwest ravers with European intellectuals and American kind of musical elites, and it's all come together in this really raw environment. Detroit itself, I think, has faced a lot of social, economic, and class disparities due to the rise and fall of industrialism, so many different things. And you can see how techno comes from this post-industrial city, And in Detroit, we invented this culture, we invented techno, right? And that's something that I find really incredible about electronic music. You start to create a community, a home, right, with these people, and those people become your friends.
There is no doubt how instrumental music has been in helping bring people together in this city. Another key player in the music scene in Detroit is the enigmatic artist, DJ, and owner of KDJ Records, Moodymann. As well as learning about the science behind why we as humans have an innate desire to connect with each other on a dance floor, I'm also keen to explore just how music and the power of shared musical experiences can impact communities. Moodymann hosts the legendary community-based Soulscape events and has been producing and performing music for over 25 years.
I want to talk about community, because for me, I'm getting the sense that community is like at the core of what Soulscape means and the reason why you do it. And how important is community and music on a local perspective in Detroit, but also from a global perspective as well?
Everything, that's what it means. Community is everything. You know, it made me who I am. It made Soulscape what it is. It made what we are today.
What role do you think music plays in bringing people together?
It's universal. Everybody knows a good rhythm when they hear a good rhythm, you know? You don't need to be educated, or you don't need to be black, yellow, right. You don't need to be dumb or smart. Anybody can catch a rhythm. You got 2-year-old kids, can't speak a word, but they can get down on TikTok, you know, and it's within your soul. Now it's up to you to bring it out and how you bring it out. And your environment helps you bring that out. You can go to clubs nowadays and there's everybody in there, which is beautiful. I would have loved to have that growing up. We didn't have that. We were very segregated here.
How important do you think is this shared musical experience of connecting with other people through music?
Music plays a very, very big part in companionship and meeting people and what have you. It brings communities together. It brings people together. You know, you gotta remember, music started off as a language. You know, that's how we talked at one point. That's how we communicated. That's how we let the next village know what's happening tonight. Hey, boom, 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 boom. It's going down tonight, village, where you at? You know, we spoke with music.
You know, we are tribal primates, and we have never lived more fractured or isolated and lonely lives than today. And so the capacity of music to both help us with our constant ever-on curse of ourselves, and also connect us, and it could be with complete strangers, right? But if we are all dancing and moving to that same beat, we are kin for at least as long as the music plays and before the lights come up. So music and dance are very, very strong, both sort of invitations to think and feel and be in a different way, but also entrainment tools to actually help lead us out of that tired, wired, stressed, constant fibrillation that many of us find ourselves stuck in these days.
Music makes me feel like I can let loose, let go of everything else that's happening in the world, and you could just have like an amazing time with your night. People are always there to have a good time with each other. Everyone wants to help each other out, support each other, look after each other, and you just become like a family.
I think as human beings, the impact of music goes straight into the body, so straight through the brain, almost into the body, this visceral experience. I think most of the elements that we are impacted by as humans, we have to try and digest cognitively or using thought processes first to make meaning and sense of it. Where music has its great strength is that it goes straight in. I think we don't have to make sense of it. We can almost open ourselves up viscerally and embrace it and feel it and sense it. And I think that's what happens on the dance floor. I think people are just living in that moment without having to make sense of it.
How do you know when a track has a groove to it?
Ooh, your body will tell you. Your body, you don't have to know. You don't have to think. Neck down will tell you. Your soul is gonna vibrate through that, and your brain is gonna agree with it. And that's when you know you got a good track. That's when you know you got to get down. Let me tell you something that's amazing about Soulscape. When we get together and crews get on the rink together in unison, we become one.
It was an absolute privilege to be able to spend some time with Moody Man in Detroit and get a feeling for how he and his team have used music and movement to bring people together.
That sense of being on the dance floor, not being self-conscious. The loud music plays into that, and you feel anonymous, even though you're not visually anonymous. And from that anonymity and that sense of vulnerability and abandon, we feel like we're one with everybody in the room. It's why the dance floor can be so addicting. It's a very powerful and I'd say unifying experience.
For me, music means everything. Music is the most important thing, and you can heal everything with the right music. You can change the world with the right music, so music means everything.
After my time in Detroit, it was becoming more and more apparent just how integral dancing is in enhancing our experience of music. It poses the question, just how much of the magic of the dance floor lies in the connection between the body and the brain? I've come to Virginia Tech to meet neuroscientist Dr. Julia Basso. Dr. Basso heads up a team conducting pioneering research into the relationship between movement and brain function. The team maps the electrical activity inside the head, working at the intersection of art and science.
So music, right, has this really rhythmic quality to it. And just like the brain, right, when we hear sound, when we hear music in particular, kind of these rhythms of music come into our auditory system, they come into the ear, and they're broken down into their component forms. And so brain activity is the same. There's all different kinds of rhythms of the brain. For example, alpha activity, theta activity, gamma activity. And so music is the same way. And so the brain actually functions to differentiate these sound waves, essentially, that it then processes.
Julia and her team were kind enough to show me how they are conducting their research using something called EEG.
Electroencephalography, or EEG, reads the brain's activity. This cap in particular is 32 electrodes. Here we have the frontal, the prefrontal cortex kind of electrodes, the temporal lobe electrodes. So it records cortical brain activity, the patterns of neuronal activity, kind of the firing of population levels of neurons. So this is a wet electrode cap. We use this in particular because we do mobile electroencephalography, where we're moving around the room, moving around the space while we're recording brain activity. We're using this EEG gel, the wet gel, to help amplify the signal, essentially.
Julia's work allowed me to see how different parts of the brain respond to our movement as we dance, and she is specifically researching the way that movement can help improve mood, memory, and social interactions.
So Rachel, will you start moving, start dancing, and see what the brain activity looks like in motion? Oh, wow. So as Rachel is dancing here, we see her beautiful movement along with her brain activity. And this is the brain in motion. These are all of the signals of the brain together. So we can actually extract from this through a technique called fast Fourier transform, where we break down this conglomerate signal, the whole signal, into the brain waves like theta, like alpha, beta, and gamma, some of the brain waves that we've been talking about earlier. The brain activity that we see here might be mimicked on the dance floor, and subsequently, if we have many dancers moving together to the music, being stimulated by your music, right, we might see many brains looking like this, right? Looking similar and having that rhythmic activity. And so when we dance together, when we listen to music and wanting to be together, what's happening is that some of those social aspects of the brain, the social brain, some of those areas include medial prefrontal cortex, so areas right under our forehead, also areas of the temporal parietal junction and the amygdala. These are all areas of the brain that get activated when we're engaged in social connection. And so at the same time, if our dopamine neurons are firing, they're motivating us to want to engage in this behavior. And that whole social network of brain areas is kind of lighting up, firing together. So there's a lot of inter-brain synchrony that's happening at the level of these social brain networks.
Speaking with Dr. Basso made me realize how many parts of the brain are actively engaged in regulating our emotions and social connections. So combine that with the impact of music and dancing, it's becoming more and more obvious that the levels of neural activity stimulated when we hit the club must be going off the charts. When I perform, it really makes all the difference when I can see how people react to the music that I play. The way that people move and dance and interact with each other is probably one of the best forms of feedback for me on how they're feeling.
The thing about dancing or being in rhythm with other people is that you really start to feel like what it means to be connected to yourself and to your body, but also to be connected to other people through the way that music moves us. And I think that sense of collective movement is special, it's kind of unparalleled. When we can find the fluidity in our own bodies, then I think we're able to find like a fluidity that releases a lot of the traumas or stresses or difficulties that we like live with. So like, yeah, movement is medicine, movement is healing, movement is like particle readjustment.
I feel like I'm in a movie when the music is hitting my head. Like I literally feel like I'm like dancing. I feel like I'm in a movie. Like if it's a beat that really hits, like I don't know, some sort of beats, your body doesn't even need to do anything. You just feel it. Like I don't have to describe it. Your brain chemistry just absolutely changes. Like you're just like.
I learned from Julia's research that some of the most powerful and complex parts of our brain are activated when we move our bodies to music. The different chemicals and electrical impulses that are created, combined with the nonverbal communication we experience through our movement, all work together to enhance the collective sense of euphoria we can feel on the dance floor.
I think that music entices us to want to use our bodies. We're not just listening to it and enjoying it passively. We can actually engage with it on a much greater level.
We feel free when we dance. Like, it's just a feeling. We dance, like the music comes and we dance differently when it's different style. We feel really free and really confident, and it's incredible.
There's this thing that's called the flow state, and it's characterized by focused attention, a loss of a sense of self, a loss of a sense of time, and really the focused attention is a special kind where you're not really aware of yourself or what you're doing. You're outside yourself, and electronic music is really great at inducing it, which is why so many raves and so many parties and even therapeutic uses of music involve the repetitiveness. That repetition allows you to enter a meditative state, and you can close off the inner chatter of your brain and the inner dialogue and just be. And when you can relax into that state of here and now, that's when the trance can come.
So flow has a number of benefits, both for our sort of physical or physiological well-being, and also just for our mental state, happiness, fulfillment with life. So there is that just sense of, if you are having those moments where you're deeply immersed in the present moment, where you feel graceful, skillful, and empowered, and then even more potently, it can happen in the relationship between the artist and the crowd. When an artist can sync up and link up and co-create with their audience a sort of emergent experience that is really only right there in that now, and we are interdependent on each other for getting to that sweet spot.
As a DJ, I know firsthand what it feels like to get into a state of flow, where the selection of the music just feels intuitive. I'm having a great time, the crowd is having a great time, and sometimes I can completely lose track of time. The hours of my DJ set can fly by. There is a synergy between me and the crowd that is easy to get lost in.
Well, I think the connection with the crowd is the most important part of DJing. It's a symbiotic relationship. Whether it's a party for 20 people or 20,000, it's when you have a connection with the crowd and you create this new energy, when you get the chills, when these things happen. And that's something that I think is really special about electronic music.
This theory that when you gather in a very specific space, people they don't just wander around randomly in a space. They need certain indicators to orient themselves. This was something that was brought up in like a church context where people have to look at a certain pivot point in order to eventually start talking to another individual or start bonding with another individual. I think the club kind of recreates that experience where there's like a pivot point where people are focused on the DJ, and then they're able to find that kind of communal force between them. They feel like they're a part of something bigger. They feel like there's like kind of a transcendence, and part of well-being as a human, it involves autonomy, it involves agency, it involves purpose, but it also involves a feeling of transcendence. And that is when you feel like you're part of something greater than yourself. You can experience that in nature, but you can also experience that on the dance floor if the DJ gets it right.
There is nothing quite like the euphoria you can experience as a DJ when you're completely in sync with your audience. It might not happen all the time, but there was one moment from my Boiler Room set in 2021 that perfectly captured this feeling for me.
I can talk about a very particular moment in her set at Boiler Room where she was playing this remix. Whenever that song would come on, people would just go insane. But anyway, Kike played this deconstructed version of the song, which extended the build-up. And we all kind of could hear the teasing, of the song. It gave us a moment to like really get into the vibe. We were all like having this like slow build, and then it dropped. And I like blacked out. We just danced so hard, and Kike was dancing and jumping. Also, like she was like so in it. I think that's one of my favorite dance floor experiences that I've ever had. It was unbelievable. It was so good.
When all of a sudden the beat drops and the brain can really fully engage the somatosensory cortex, motor cortex, the frontal cortex, right? Because we were thinking about something and all of a sudden the DJ acted upon it, right? And so prefrontal cortex might be activated in that case because our anticipation, our reward was met. And we know that with these dopamine neurons, especially, they're called reward neurons. And when the brain is met with an anticipated reward that it gets, the dopamine neurons they respond, they burst, and there's dopamine available for the brain.
I love when they're like looking at the crowd, they change up the music. Also, when they're about to drop a beat or whatever, they look at the crowd and they hint at you that it's coming and you can get ready. I feel like we all join together because we know something sick is happening and we know that we're all going to be super excited, or everyone's getting ready to drop their best dance moves. Like it brings everyone together, and you may as well, you might not even ever speak to those people again once you leave the dance floor, but that was a moment shared.
When I DJ, I'm trying to directly influence the way that people are feeling using the music I play. I look specifically at how a crowd responds to the music, and the response creates a form of feedback I use to make my next selection. Now knowing just how much is involved in the connection between the DJ and the crowd, my question is, can this be replicated by artificial intelligence?
I've worked in the music technology field for a long time, and I've talked to the scientists who are trying to come up with an AI approach. And if it's going to work, it's going to be a long, long time from now, because what a human can bring, what a DJ can bring to reading me in the moment and the people I'm with, a computer can't do that.
So my job is safe.
I think your job is safe.
Fantastic. Good to know.
As well as that connection with the crowd, the way that a DJ mixes the music together is a key part of any great DJ set. I'm keen to learn as much as I can about the science behind this. So I've traveled to Birmingham University to meet Dr. Maria Wittek, a senior research fellow who is investigating the music cognition and neuroscience involved when a DJ mixes music together.
I study the cognitive science and neuroscience of music. And currently my research is about the cognitive neuroscience of DJing. Synchrony is a really interesting aspect of human behavior. And DJing is a particular take on that kind of synchrony. So the DJ's brain will be synchronized with the music, and the audience's brains will be synchronized with the music. So there is a kind of collective synchrony that happens between the brains of different people in the club.
When we listen to music together, our brain waves literally synchronize with each other. If you hear somebody say, I'm on the same wavelength as that DJ, it's literally true. Your brain waves are synchronized.
This idea of synchrony between people was really interesting. I wanted to know more about the concept of entrainment that I'd heard about a few times on my journey already.
So yeah, entrainment is a really interesting term. So we often think about entrainment in physics as two pendulums. And they're independent, but then they come in contact. So they start off in different phase, but then eventually they become synchronized. And that is through entrainment. So essentially one of the pendulums drives the other. Synchronizing with other people creates a kind of blurred boundary between them. So if you're synchronizing with someone, it becomes kind of harder to distinguish what is you and what is them. And you become a system together that is this synchrony, right? And so you can kind of think of increased overlap between the people who are synchronizing together. And that overlap sort of opens up channels for connection and bonding and communication. We can think of the music as driving the entrainment of us as listeners. And then we can expand that even more and say that the DJ is the driver of the entrainment that happens in the club, because the DJ is playing the records on the turntables, and the audience becomes entrained to the music.
When you bring on music, you're getting this thing that's called haptic feedback. So I'm getting a sense, I'm not only hearing the music and the sound waves and kind of entraining to that, but I'm also feeling the movement of another person. Maybe we're jumping up and down together, maybe fist pumping, whatever it might be. And so our bodies are in tune with one another, and then subsequently our brains start to become entrained with one another, in tune. So it's actually rhythms of the brain happening in synchrony with each other.
So the nightclub, when it's done right, is a place where your movement, the music, and the synchronicity you feel with others on the dance floor all combine to help you feel more open to connection with those around you, even if you've never met them before.
I believe in the power of music. I believe in the power of dance floors, because increasingly now you see that there's not that many cultural spaces where people of all different backgrounds can get together. There's like this whole concept of like a third space in sociology, where it's not work, but it's not your home. And those third spaces are becoming increasingly diminished as we have more remote working, or we have different ways of becoming more socially atomized. And I think the dance floor is a place where many people are coming and able to see a lot of like-minded individuals. And that's when you feel this kind of togetherness.
I mean, the dance floor is the original safe space, you know, the place originally where you went to get away from everything and to be comfortable with being who you were, a freak, a goth, you know, queer, all these things was at the dance floor. You know, you'd all meet at the club on the weekend and be like, hey, what's up? You know, and you're some preppy kid or whatever. Those were all the people that came together to kind of celebrate music and life. And I still believe in that deep power of music and the dance floor.
We're all humans and we have more that's in common with us than divides us. So we wanted to make this night he, she, they, where it was for all sexualities, all genders, all races, with people who shared the same morality as you. And we have a set of house rules which covers like no homophobia, no misogyny, no racism, no transphobia, no body shaming, because we want everyone to look up on the dance floor and not just feel that you're allowed in, but to feel welcomed. I think it really does unify people into this really nice, harmonious group.
This warm welcome on the dance floor, no matter your sexuality, skin color, gender, wealth, social class, or where you are from really is what should lie at the heart of club culture. We're not there yet, but these are the ideals shared by many in the electronic music community. Music, movement, and people seem to be the primary drivers of a great club night. However, the production and the lights can also be integral to heightening the dance floor experience and our sense of connection. I came across the Alpha Wave Experience, an art collective led by DJ Dan Ganassia that uses rotating lights to induce different brain states. I was curious about how lights can interact with music to transform our emotional state. So I'm off to Lille to find out more.
I'm Dan Ganassia. I'm a DJ producer, part of the trio Apollonia with Diet Sanderom and Shonky.
Where did the inspiration for the Alpha Wave Experience come from?
So the inspiration is coming from Brian Gaisin's Dream Machine that I discovered in 2014. I was looking for some visuals for my band Apollonia, and came to me this machine from the 50s called the Dream Machine. This machine is a rotating device. The flickering effect on the optic nerve will increase the brain frequencies. And you look at it with eyes closed, it's putting you on a psychedelic journey or a meditative state. And I found the plans on internet and I built my own one.
The Alpha Wave Experience is a machine that creates brain entrainment. So brain entrainment is a technique of brain frequencies modulation. You can modulate the brain to work in a specific frequency. From the low frequencies to the higher frequencies, we have the delta, that's the lowest frequency, so it's deep sleep, and it goes from 0 to 6 hertz. And then you have the theta, that is a hypnagogic state brainwave from 6 to 8. And that is when people are more prone to be suggestive to hypnosis and so on. And then you have the alpha that goes from the 8 to the 12 hertz. That is an awake state, but really relaxed. And then you have the beta that can go from the 15 hertz up to the 30. That is a really high cognition state brainwaves when you're studying, when you're working, and when you are focusing on something. And then you have the gamma, that's the highest.
I had heard about unintentional brain entrainment, but this was the first mention of deliberate entrainment I had come across. I was interested in knowing more about these specific types of brainwaves that could be produced and just why you would want to induce the brain into specific states.
So brain entrainment usually is used as meditation/hypnotic technique. And now, because of technology, we can go even to really, really high frequencies, so we can lead the brain to different states, even ecstatic states. So the main goal, and on our opinion, it can be used as a therapeutical tool to modulate the brain to states that people should be in, but they cannot do it by themselves. So we can help them with this technology to get into those states. Clubbing is like, and as even the theme of this exhibition is an old form of shamanism. It's like using rhythms, using drums to put people on ecstatic states. And sound and music is, we usually say that is a non-semantical communication. So you can communicate your emotions even to someone that doesn't speak your language. So I think that's why even people with completely different experiences, they somehow feel the same emotions at the same time. That's why they synchronize and they get all together dancing and jumping at the same time, synchronized, because sound is the unifying form of communicating emotions.
Having played on hundreds of dance floors, I'm incredibly aware of the impact of light. When the light technician is on point and working together with my music, it can really enhance the experience for people on the dance floor and change the whole atmosphere in the club. The fact that we can use lights to intentionally induce people into different frequencies of brainwaves like alpha and theta waves is a game changer.
When you can get deeper into that state and that loss of oneself in a room with others, then you're able to connect deeper and to the music and kind of lose yourself into a trance. There's a whole science between the distance of a space and the tempo that you're playing. There's different tempos in which the reverberation of the back of the wall fits in those spaces. And then you have that with the right volume, and then you can create a certain type of hypnotism. And I think that's what the repetition of electronic music can really play into creating some type of hypnotism at the right volume and speed, which is something I try to play with.
we've come full circle and I'm back home in Berlin and I'm here to meet a producer and a DJ that I really, really admire. His name is King.
The one thing I specifically admire about him, and I'm very curious to pick his brain about, is his approach to his sets, as he always seems to maintain a fantastic connection with his audience. I'm particularly curious to know more about the techniques he uses to get the crowd going.
I am King from Sofia, Bulgaria, and right now we are at the Riverside Studios in Berlin. I am a live electronic music artist, which gives me the ability to change the sound, the groove, immediately, just following my intuition, and I can react spontaneously, and that's quite an amazing experience because I feed off the crowds, but also I feed them with sound, and it's such an immediate exchange.
Do you ever feel yourself getting into almost like this state of flow?
Yeah, I normally get lost into sound. When I play, my approach to it is more like trusting my muscle memory. I don't think so much. It's mostly letting my body go. I like to tease the people. I like to delay the pleasure a little bit. So sometimes I build up this. I'm into the break, and people expect the drop, and it never comes. I just delay that moment, and luckily with my setup, and also these days the DJ technology, the media players are so developed. If you do a DJ set, you can also you can pretty much do a live remix on the fly. So also for the DJs, that's something valid. Yeah, I'm just testing people's nerves. I grown up in Bulgaria, and I witnessed the time when the country was under the communist regime, and music was something that also inspired the people to want to be free. Music can not only cross borders, but also can, take them down. So it's pretty powerful too.
We could have spoken for hours, but I asked King if he could show me how he goes about creating those special moments on the dance floor.
I would suggest let's pretend we are in a club and we
just jam. Okay. Make them go crazy.
Yeah. Is it too much?
No, I'm never too much.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Wait, good job. The studio session was an amazing experience, not only because King is such an amazing person, super, super kind, and really, really guided me through his tips and tricks that I can take with me on the road, but just the energy I got from, even though I know what's coming, the anticipation, the build-up, the release, the teasing that he speaks about as one of his key techniques. I was feeling those rushes, the dopamine, the oxytocin, just the two of us in the room. So thinking about how that translates in terms of 1,000 people, 10,000 people, 100,000 people at the front of a festival stage, all having those moments of release and excitement and tension all at the same time. It's definitely changed my mind about and changed my thought process and how I'm going to look into DJ sets. And also I'm just excited to try it out again as well.
I have seen and learned so much over the last few months of making this film. This journey has helped me realize what a powerful impact music and dancing can have on us. And so it's amazing to think about what we could achieve if we harness this power more. How can we promote harmony? How can we build community? How do we support the next generation and encourage them to harness the power of music to cross some of the boundaries that exist in society? There are a number of fantastic initiatives around the world doing exactly this. And one such project is Bridges for Music in South Africa.
So Bridges for Music is a non-profit organization with an aim to empower youth coming from disadvantaged communities through the power of music and also to equip them with the necessary skills to be able to become change makers. Music can definitely bring down barriers and create a change in a community. I mean, South Africa is a perfect example, of that, because, just looking back in the olden days when during the apartheid times, music was kind of like used a lot in order to share or express the messages that our people were facing during those times. So it has created that safe space and a friendly environment, with great mentors as well that one can easily reach in order to get inspired or even learn from and be mentored by.
I'm on my own personal journey of using music to build new connections, and I'm doing this through the community radio station I co-founded called Aroko Radio in Accra, Ghana. We're putting on a boiler room event at Freedom Skate Park, run by Surf Ghana founder Sandy Alibo, to help amplify the vibrant electronic music scene that exists in the city.
Sandy Alibo is the founder of Surf Ghana. She runs Freedom Skate Park and does so much for the community in general in Accra. She's in the process of setting up a new music studio, a free community studio called Vibrate Studio, also based in the skate park. She also works a lot with empowerment of women and in general just providing resources and access and support to the community to also develop themselves as well.
With this studio, what is nice is like we allow the youth to try and experiment things. When you are 18 or 15 years old and you are already talented, you need to have that try, that first try, and you need to have people who trust in you. So this playground, this Freedom Skate Park, and this Vibrate Studio is exactly the tools that we want to give to the youth to actually achieve their goal.
Welcome to the first bigger intermediate workshop. We're going to be primarily using these, which are CDJs, and I'm going to be taking you through like what they are, how to connect them up, how to disconnect them.
As a DJ that learnt my craft through workshop programs, I know firsthand how tailored spaces can help create an environment to share, learn, and find out more about how others have managed to carve out a place in this industry, creating the opportunity to potentially turn a passion into a profession.
I picked so much from Kike, just watching her play, how she's just crazy on the decks. I look up to her. I want to reach that level of performing.
Seeing how she kills the stage each time, both in Accra and elsewhere, is really inspiring. It definitely lets me know that it's possible.
It's good to have a role model because it kind of it inspires you, you learn from them. Like the space here is just a space for female DJs to grow. It's the best space you could get as a female DJ who wants to grow their career.
Nice. Very nice.
Before the night got going, some of our workshop students had the chance to play the warm-up set.
3, 2, 1, go. Nice. I like to think that people are getting behind what we're trying to represent, which is, supporting and coming together as an alternative music scene in Accra.
The underground music scene is lesser known in Accra compared to the Afrobeats, highlife, and Amapiano sounds that usually dominate the airwaves. Aroko Radio and Surf Ghana produced this event together with Boiler Room, not only to support the music community in Accra, but also reinforce just how universal our collective connection to music is. We've seen firsthand how building global collaborative communities through music can have a positive impact on society in general. What a journey this has been. Meeting experts and pioneers in neuroscience and people who are passionate about building community has been truly enlightening.
This whole experience has completely changed the way I think about music and club culture and festivals, I'm going to be looking at it through a whole new lens and thinking about how I can use that to maximize the experience that I'm trying to give to the audience I'm playing to.
It was amazing to learn more from a scientific perspective exactly why we as human beings are so drawn to the dance floor. It's no surprise to me that music, movement, and lighting all play a role in releasing the concoction of chemicals in our brains that helps us feel so good. These reactions are a result of millions of years of evolution and are distinctly unique to us as humans. It cannot be denied that there is an incredible power we get from dancing alongside others, synchronizing both body and mind to help us feel more connected to one another. We still have a lot of work to do building towards more inclusive, tolerant spaces in electronic music and club culture. But this journey has highlighted to me the innate transformative potential the dance floor has, not just on us as individuals, but as a community and society too.
It's funny because when I tell people I'm a DJ, they have this idea that, we're just party people, which I am a little bit, but, that we're not really contributing much, that we're ego-driven artists that are just doing it for thrills. But I think what this whole experience has really validated for me is how important music is and these third spaces are, and club culture is, because it benefits us biologically speaking, neurologically speaking, and emotionally, physically, and mentally. And that's something that's not necessarily talked about that much when it comes to looking into club culture and its impact on society. So yeah, that's one of my key takeaways, that, we're not necessarily doctors, but, there are some positive changes that are coming about because of what music and what clubs and what DJs do.
There's a fundamental moral idea that also is evolving within our community, both with sexuality, orientation, safe spaces, how you treat someone in the club, all these different values that we've kind of structured within our community that have then start to permeate into the mainstream world, It's been a conversation for us for over a decade, now it's in the mainstream. So I was such with electronic music being a music of the future, I think the moral foundations and the utopianism that electronic music offers creates a more utopian idea of the society that we can live in.